Bitcoin looks fragile. Today it trades near $62,200. But fragility means different things depending on the world around it. The older market is still holding near its highs. Today, the S&P 500 still holds near 7,400 points, close to its historical high. If the S&P 500 begins to fail too, Bitcoin's weakness may belong to a larger risk-off move. But if the older market remains inside a healthy upward structure, then Bitcoin may be telling a different story than many expect. I observe, not instruct, for educational purposes only. Let us begin by looking at the S&P 500 by itself. Not because it predicts the future of Bitcoin, but because risk rarely breaks in isolation. We know this market comes from a long upward trend and that it is now testing a high region. So before we judge Bitcoin alone, we need to ask whether this S&P 500 high still belongs to a coherent structure. Let us make a simple exercise. We take the rising trend line found in the lows of the movement and duplicate it through the structure. What appears is a very coherent rising channel. Now, if I turn on the winds, we can see that the weekly trend is still clearly positive. The internal wind has not turned against the S&P 500 yet. But this does not mean that a fall from here would be painless. Let us look more closely. A move back toward the center of the rising channel would take the S&P 500 near 7,000 points. A deeper move toward the lower side of the channel would take it near 6,500 points. That would be a decline of roughly 17%. Painful. But if this structure is not lost, the market may still remain coherent. In that case, continued weakness in Bitcoin would not mean the same thing as a complete collapse in global risk appetite. The more difficult scenario begins if this channel breaks down. Then the reading becomes heavier. The next regions below would be near 5,900 points, and then near 5,400 points. That would be a deep bear market for the S&P 500. And nothing would guarantee that those regions would be the final floor. A fall of that scale could shake the entire market in ways that are impossible to predict with precision. But before we expect the worst scenario, let us observe what Bitcoin against the S&P 500 has to say. Beginning with the winds, Bitcoin is still inside a pessimistic trend in this dispute. It is still losing against the S&P 500, and there is no clear sign of reversal yet. But through flow geometry, this decline also has structure. Bitcoin against the S&P 500 has been moving inside a coherent descending channel, and at this moment it is touching the lower side of that possible channel. So if this reading is valid, Bitcoin is reaching a region where relative resilience may begin to appear. A sharp fall in the S&P 500 could push this pair higher only if Bitcoin falls less or begins to recover relative strength. That would help the market seek balance again. And for Bitcoin, that would be a healthier kind of weakness. Of course, descending channels often break upward, but that is not a law. The opposite can still happen. If Bitcoin loses even this relative structure, then the fall can accelerate. But that would be a premature conclusion for now. What I know is this: Bitcoin is weak. The S&P 500 is stretched but not broken. And Bitcoin against the S&P 500 is still asking whether this weakness is capitulation or only another test of relative structure. I keep observing.